portion before and after the system or the software comes in, that it's actually led by teams, and people will continue to be led by teams and people. And on that note, I'm going to reintroduce our other panelists for the webinar as well. Founders here, Harshit and Rhythm, who are with Atlin and Cubics respectively, and they lead up the finance and legal compliance. Rhythm leads up CTO and operations at Cubics, and of course we have Ashish, who's a partner at Bloom, and closely works with not just Bloom portfolio, but the larger Indian startup ecosystem on all matters related to finance. That is his core and something that he's passionate about as well. So welcome Ashish, Harshit, and Rhythm as well. And like I said, guys, feel free to either use the chat window or the Q&A window to keep putting in your questions, and we'll try and keep integrating them as we go along. Rahul, thanks a lot for joining us, and you're free to stay on for a while and pitch in for the conversation. I know you had about 25-30 minutes for us. So I will bring in the others now. So I thought for this part of the conversation, we divide it into three parts, right? We'll talk about team and structure, like Rahul spoke about. We'll talk about communication and the role that plays when you're trying to manage finance and operations. And then we'll talk about for any system or process that you have, how do you measure and track ROI, right? That becomes important, whether you're using a software, whether you're using people. So on that note, let's kick off. Harshit, you want to quickly give us a sense of where you stand on, or from your experience, what you've seen work well in terms of startups when they start growing out or scaling up, that has led to better management of finances as well as operations. Give us a sense from what the world looks like at Atlin.
Thanks, Saina. Yeah, as rightly said, like as Rahul was also mentioning about, like it's very important to have the right mix of people, right, in the organization. So when we typically see any any company, like we see it as a kind of a legal entity, but actually behind that legal entity, they are ultimately the people who are running the show. So, and I believe that an organization should be having a DNA of a sports team and not that of a family, like where every member of the sports teams know what their specific role is, and since they are amazing at their roles, they are therefore there in the teams. And therefore, like if one wants to scale from X to 10X, the composition of the team should be having the right mix of Rahul Dravid, Virat Kohli, and MSD, the ball, the temperament, and the passion, right? So that come what may, like any crisis, any uncertainty, we have all the stalwarts in the place to back the org up. And therefore, like what I have seen back days when we were starting out, right? What our founders and what are the persons who was there on the HR side focused more on the generalist side and less on the specialist, like the one who is able to have some knowledge of all the things, right, rather than all knowledge of one thing. And then as and when slowly the organization starts to grow up, like we can then focus on specializing the key functional areas with the seasoned industry professionals. Sign up.
All right. Ridhim, for you, Harshit mentioned, right, build it out like a sports team, not necessarily as a family. What is your own sense? Give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself, to Cubics, and tell us about your larger view on what has helped at Cubics in terms of streamlining processes and systems.
So I completely agree with what Harshit says. You know, it has to be like a sports team, and you know, we need people, we need departments to fall back onto each other. You know, when one department is not functioning, and you know, especially when we are dealing with situations like COVID, it's not only sales or projects which can drive the business. You know, it can be better HR practices, it can be a lot of training and you know things. So it has to be more of an all-round perspective of the business. You know, all-round perspective of all the teams, everything which you know lead all of us to success. Just around those things.
Okay, Ashish, your take, right? There were a couple of points that Rahul brought up as well, in terms of, what he is seen typically as a stage or uh, area when founders or the founding team start thinking more closely about putting in place processes and systems. What is your own observation here in India? What have you observed, not just from the Bloom portfolio, but in general, in terms of how founders can start thinking more systematically about these things? When should they start thinking more systematically about this?
Sure. So thanks, Aina, and the Let's Venture team. It's a pleasure to be here along with all of you. Uh, Let me break this down into two or three parts, Saina, if I may. And if it gets a little longer, feel free to stop me. But this is something which is very fundamental. I might use my quota here. So the team is the most fundamental part. What we have observed consistently is that in early stages there will definitely be a very strong orientation to focus on tech, the solutioning, and the go-to-market. And I think when you are not yet monetizing, everything else just takes a backseat, and that's perfectly fine. But at some point in time, as monetization starts kicking in, founders then start giving due importance to creating an all-round team, and that I would say is true for more than 3 out of every 4 companies that we end up seeing. Uh, where I have always mentioned to founders in our portfolio and wherever outside we are conversing with prospective founders or on sessions like these, is that one needs to build the finance organizations simultaneously. One needs to start early enough. For example, as you are going ahead with product development, how to treat that expense of product development. Do you go and treat it as a capital expenditure, or do you straight away keep writing it off? That has a bearing, because companies do pivot, and once in a while you might end up selling. We had a similar situation in our portfolio when Zopper sold out one of its products and businesses. And there are, thankfully, the accounting and the overall management of the IP was done accurately in the books right from day one, and that resulted into very serious tax optimization. Now, for startups which are burning money and are typically looking at life in spurts of 1.5 to 2 years each time they raise money, every money saved is as powerful as the money raised. I won't say money earned, because you're still at a phase where you might not be really earning money. So the composition of the team and the founders and the finance seeing each other as ally becomes very important. I have been a fan of in-house finance teams. Outsourcing can be brought in by way of supervision and mentoring, and not by way of the core function being outsourced. Wherever there are value additions which the current team and setup cannot fulfill, of course, we will reach out for outsourced organizations and see if somebody can fill in for those. So at the middle layer sits the core team. There are some parts like routine tasks and operational aspects like taxes and filings and returns. Those you can feel free to outsource, no problem. And there are some aspects where some finance person, the team needs guidance, mentoring, go-to person to consult. You can get somebody from your core investors to mentor that person, or somebody who is specialized or internal audit firm to take care of those. So this is in a nutshell, sign up in terms of my take on finance. And lastly, if I will just summarize it, I would basically say that finance, like founders, need to obsess about the customer's problem and not the company's solution. When we get very obsessed about our solution as founders, I think we end up looking very inward. The whole ability to for the company to really focus outward and bring in amendments, developments, is something that the healthy combination with ops, finance, and product that can be achieved. So this is my 2 bits. We look forward to more Q&A.
Yep. All right. Harshit, you want to comment on this? And I know that we had brought this up when we were chatting last week as well, right? And I think Ashish has given you a perfect segue to talk about this in terms of how you work closely with the founders, with the product, with the development team to actually ensure or think about at Atlin what the ramifications of certain business decisions are, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about the money.
Exactly, very rightly said, Saina. And therefore, what we see around internally, what we prepare is the reporting statement. And generally, when we actually look at the reporting statement, like every line item has a story to tell. And when I look at the reporting statement, I see that my job is not to report now. My job is of a storyteller, and to tell the story for each of the line item, the one who actually owns it, right? And it can be any activity, right? So to like for an instance, right, like when I look at the line item, like cost of revenue would be one of the items that like every company or every managing team would be looking at. And generally a company which is there in the tech space, their third party infrastructure spends would be one of the major components of the cost of revenue. Typically what we have seen, it's around 50% of it forms around 50% of the total cost of revenue your infrastructure spends. And when I look on the totality aspects, it forms around 10 to 20%, right? So, and considering that particular thing, like insights can be drawn around whether we have alerts in this in space where the things start coming up when any budgets are being breached out, like how effective is a cost saving plan, whether actually we have a cost saving plan there in the space or not. In the infrastructure spends, there is something called reserve instances where you can go out and reserve the instance that the product team would be working upon. Have that, like the reserve instance there or not? Checking the type of instance before we go out and making any deployment. Having as detailed and drill down report for each of the different type of the charges, seeing around like what's the month on month spend and analyzing the reason behind it. So like what our job is not only to analyze and track these, right? It's also important to timely and rightly communicate to the activity owner. And I would say, like, how often do we communicate? Do we communicate once in a month, or do we communicate once in 15 days? Like, it can be as often as daily, and communicate not just to the person who is there on the top of the pyramid. It can be like to the person who is there at the bottom of the pyramid, who is actually working on it and who is managing on a day-to-day basis, so that all the numbers that are there on their fingertips and awareness is built right bottom up and not the top down.
All right.
Yeah.
Got that. Just to bring in rhythm into the conversation over here, what is your own sense on how this plays out in a business like Cubix? So if you can give us a little bit of a background to what Cubix does and how managing some of these processes actually efficiently is actually core to your business actually delivering on value creation, right? Give us a sense of that.
Yeah. So basically, we are a slightly different company in the game, though we are a technology company, but we are into hardware technology implementation. So a lot of our cost happens on site. So we actually have real people going onto sites and integrating products. So cost control becomes the biggest thing. And it's not only the cost of people what we are dealing with. We are dealing with cost of incidentals, cost of flight tickets, cost of time spent, cost of requests from the customers, cost of delays in payments. So we really need to look at those costs on a day-to-day basis. The contracts are large and they span over time. So in the end of the contract, whatever money we save is the only money we earn. So essentially, we need to look at a dashboard on a daily basis before we start work for that day onto about 70, 80 projects, which we concurrently take up. So every day, the respective project managers, they look at their dashboards and they plan their day. They plan the resources from where they go, from which place to go, So it's, in our case, working at those thin margins, it's more of a daily thing. Like what Harshit said, that, when you're looking at server costs and things like that, you can look at it on a 15-day or on a 30-day basis. But in our case, it's just that we need to act on it before we go wrong about it. So that's how strong we have to build a financial system. That's how we want all that data to be flowing into a system by the end of each day, so that we know that okay, this is where we stand and this is what we have to do the next day.
All right.
So yeah.
In the interest of making it very experiential, Harshit, can you give us a sense of at Atlin how closely do you all monitor, your spends, your finances, your burn? You are a venture-backed company. Give us a sense of that, and how it aligns, or how that storytelling that you were talking about actually goes back to each department or each function in terms of them then looking at whether they are being efficient in the way each part of the business is getting built out. And then after that I want Ashish to reflect on whether that can be stifling, right? I mean, I know for certain businesses it's critical, but can an sort of undue monitoring of the finances sometimes be stifling? So Harshit, to you first, and then to Ashish.
Uh, uh, exactly, like very rightly said, Saina. When we look at, so typically when we look at our PL, or I would say our financial statement, generally we see that we tend to incur around 50 to 60% of the total spend on the folks, right? That's what any tech company or any SaaS company, which is I would say a people focused company, would be spending on. The balance spend would be coming around on the tools, right? The third party infrastructure tools that we would be using internally, some of them to run our own processes, and some of them to actually use while developing the product for the final customers. The balance then get allocated to, I would say, your selling and marketing, your general and administration. Some of them would be going around research and development. Uh, when we have those bifurcations and those buckets ready, right, we then try to go ahead and see and analyze to the factors which are responsible around on all of these important buckets. So let's say, to start with, in terms of the people spend, right, like it completely depends upon the team size and the team composition. And if, let's say, the team is something which is working on a product, on a prototype, and it might be requiring engineers. And as I like Rahul rightly mentioned around in the beginning, one needs to identify the right mix around, like how many times, and even Ashish was also mentioning about, like the right mix of uh, how much folks do we require actually in-house in terms of doing that, and how much we would be doing a cost benefit analysis that could be developed through an outsourced entity. Work could also be done from like interns from your budding, your IT, your engineering universities and your institutes. So that's what's about in terms of the people spend. The next spend that actually comes around would be your online tools and your infrastructure spends, where we actually have a dashboard kind of built in, wherein all the data that is around your cost and the spends, that flows into that particular dashboard, and we would be able to see that how much we are spending around on each of the different tools, and where is the ones where we need to pull the gap and actually stop the outflow. And the balance that actually comes around your general administration and your overheads, which is something I would say the drivers of those particular costs are typically being driven around your people and and your tools expenses, where we see that we could hardly like bring around any efficiency around that. So we know that some of the factors which we could control and some of the factors which we could not, and we generally try to go over the factors which are there under our hand, talking to the business owners, trying to have a discussion and a conversation with them, find out any inefficiencies are around there or not, any alternative is there, and what matrices that they would like to track, like what is something that they want to get associated with, and they would identify that this is something that is actually associating that particular performance. So for example, the sales and marketing team would be focusing on more on the ads, the Google ads, your LinkedIn ads, your Facebook ads, and
Right.
that's something that they would like to know about how they would be performing. A talent team might want to know that how much folks that they are coming and how much they would be spending around bringing people in the office for an in-office interview. So it completely depends upon team to team, their respective requirements, knowing like where they are actually spending, going back inside, looking at what do we have internally, how well we could report, and then actually sitting around. Like it's more of a kind of a one-to-one session with each team, and then doing your homework and giving out the final reports to your beneficiaries.
So, Saina, in terms of whether it can be stifling, I think uh, the best of finance persons will understand that ships are safest at the shore, but that's not why they're built. If you have money in the bank and you are going to find, if I'm going to find ways and means to tell my founders why we should not spend, basically it is going to be very stifling. So there is going to be that level of that lack of understanding that creeps in, which never really goes away. If the person has not understood the business and the goals very well, the finance person will have to be as much of a specialist in his or her areas of competency as a generalist at the business level, and empathize very well with the founder. So the chemistry becomes very critical. At each point in time, in the early stages of a business, not everything will be an outflow or an inflow of cash for sure. One has to really put on that lens and understand whether it's an expense or an investment. Getting the right level of customer success professionals earlier on in a B2B startup becomes sometimes very critical. So while the company may have a limited cash balance, and we are definitely trying to maximize marketing so that we can get more revenues, but a good finance person will do his analysis and will understand intuitively that we have to make sure that we don't have churn. And if for minimizing the churn, we need a certain set of people who are going to really focus on customer success. That is going to be a great way to improve the credentials and the matrices of the business. So here it is going to be boiling down to people who are going to see eye to eye. And that goes back to an earlier point I made, that the founder needs to identify the person a little early. Because it takes a little bit of a lag for finance people to really get deeper and empathize with the business. Of course, it is a job to make sure that they are up and hit the ground running. There cannot be any slack that we can cut. But the initial focus will always be firefighting. The initial focus will always be to ensure that, oh, I hope I'm not running around my deadlines and not missing my audits and all that.
Yeah.
Only when you're done with those, you can actually start putting your head together on whether the pricing is right, whether my cost attributions are going up in a decent direction, my LTVs are computed right. And then you suddenly start becoming from a cost center to actually a strategic ally of the team. So in my view, Saina, it's stifling or not, it is going to be a function of the communication. Not every degree of process has to be looked upon as a time consuming decision. So far as you're making decisions fast, load on to process, I don't think anybody cares. If there are 3 extra steps, but you're not really taking time for somebody to, okay, I looked at it last week and I'll come back to you later. No, you can't work like a multi-location, 1,000 people company. It's
Right.
30, 40 people company with max 2 locations. So time is of essence. So far as a person understands that and founder is going to judge with that nimbleness and make processes flexible. Understand that exception is a norm in a startup. So you're not going to be able to really do all that what typical finance professional would do in a 1,000-member company. So far as I think both sides understand that, I think it will not be stifling. One will understand that these have to go hand in hand. Otherwise, you will have leakages which you can't plug. Otherwise, you'll have a culture which is not going to end up on the accountability and ROI, which we can speak later.
Yeah. I think good points made. And I think on that note, also the question around, what is an investment and what is an expense? And I think on those lines, we have a question from Shivam that's come in. And I'm just going to read it out. And, we can start with you, Ashish, and then Harshit and Rhythm can comment on this as well. How do you avoid a situation where you stifle capital spend, which is critical for growth in hindsight, in the fear of not making your business cash burning? What are the things that you need to take into consideration?
I think, Saina, this is always a conundrum, right?
Yeah.
It's never, after working with 100 companies also, for me, the 101st company, I'll be in the same conundrum. So we only have one thing in our control, to understand that until we have made the decision, it's with us. Once we have made the decision, allocated that spend, I think we have the results may not fully be in our control. So I think trying to get some degree of certainty analysis is important, but at the same time, I would not get caught up into at an earlier stage, business is going to burn money. We know the fact the money has been raised to get to a certain uh, sales, a certain level of product development, or a certain level of qualitative metrics which will help the company take a better leap of faith or move to the next orbit. To be able to get there, I think some kind of a planned decision has to be allocated. So far as the spending in line with what the planning was, I think it's perfectly fine. Many times you have the luxury of breaking it up into smaller parts. So you don't need to hire 6 people at the same time for maybe a certain part of the DevOps function or certain marketing function. You can do it two at a time. Let those two show some ROI and add 3 more or 4 more. You can be gradual, but you can't have the luxury of waiting out for 8 months. So, as I said earlier, the right balance of being nimble, being decisive, and being iterative and experiment. You can't live alone and you can't be shy away from making mistakes. To the extent you can know that I'll cut my losses very quickly and I will find a better way of taking it forward. So there are enough cases, we can talk about a few examples later, but I think this is the way it will work.
All right. Harshit, you want to take a stab at this?
Yeah, to actually add on to what Ashish was also saying, I generally look at the way like whenever any area where we would be going out and we would be burning our capital, right? Like it's very important that we try to map whatever that we are burning around to what we would be making out of that particular burning, right? For example, if a very instant ROI is being seen when you actually spend on the ads, and you are able to see how many leads that you are being able to generate, whether they are actually a lead that can be turned into a prospective customer. And another type of spend would be, as Ashish was mentioning about regarding the product related spends that might not turn or help any organization to get the revenue as soon as possible as that spend would actually be able to do that. What I think that any person in the role of the finance team would be important to actually help any founder to draw that particular timeline in terms of it, how long it will be helping you to take that to monetize. So much so that till that time you actually reach for the monetization, it should not be that you do not have enough money in your coffers, right? And then you go out and look for actually spending out. So that particular mapping that needs to be very important, and seeing how often and how frequently that particular ROI could be generated out of it before we are actually spending around.
All right. So I think a related question on this note actually came in from Swapnil a little earlier, and I didn't take it then, but I think now is a good time to actually address that, right? So Swapnil asked, what things can a startup do or can take care of to protect already acquired market share when competing with large companies in that space, right? Who might have the cash to burn. You don't have the cash to burn. How do you streamline? How do you best manage what you have and try and protect your market share? I know it's not exactly. I thought let's address it to the best way possible now, and maybe any of you can go for it, Rhythm, if you want to talk about this.
I'm saying, I'm saying that's their business. I mean, that's the core thing of the business. They got to know how to do it. You know, nobody else can answer that question for any other company. You know, that's the difference you're creating in the market. You know, so you got to know this before you start. That how will you fight with the bigger boys in the market? Of course, there'll be people and there'll be more people. There'll be smaller companies becoming bigger. So I think it's purely dependent on the business, purely dependent on the time, the situation, and of course keeping the service level really high is I think the one thing which is a no-brainer. But yeah, the other things around, we've got to find new ways to do it, I think, on a very, very regular basis.
Saina,
Uh,
If I can just add a minute here. So uh, this is going to be different, dependent also on whether we are a B2B business or it's a B2B, B2C business, right? In B2C, there are enough price wars which take away the markets, which can have the potential of swinging, and there's only so much you can do. I can tell you from empirical evidence and our past experience, we had enough companies where, like Purple, we didn't have enough money to burn until for the first 8-9 years of our journey. I don't think we really ever split it to the founders, Manish and Rahul. We never slipped onto the slippery slope of saying we'll counter the market forces. If Amazon has discounted and announced a sale, let me announce a bigger sale. So that is falling into a deep valley, and you're not going to set yourself or give yourself any chance. I think at a B2C level, your best bet is, if you want to be building it efficiently, is how you're going to keep the customer engaged and how truly people are going to be intrigued by the differentiation of the product experience they get on your web, and how seamless you're going to make it for them to get their products. Beyond the point, I don't think everybody wants things on a single day. So you have to understand and build what differentiation you want to provide, what frills you want to provide. And if market is going ahead and pushing out those kind of frills and differences for the sake of, I think let them do it. You are better off focusing on your core and your value add. And once in a while, for the right reason, if you're losing market share at the cost of conserving cash or focusing on profitability at certain scale, I think you're better off with that way. On the B2B front, I think you will have to be creating enough modes in the product offering itself and be understanding the client problems more continually than otherwise we end up doing. Sometimes your business is such that client has to make significant changes to the way they operate in their backend to adopt the solution that we have developed. At that point in time, after spending that much money, there is not a good probability that the client may switch, because they have done a fair bit of effort to adopt you as a vendor. So then, unless we have already messed up something very big. So there, I think understanding what is it that going to lead the client to switch. It is not always money. Those days are gone in Indian startup ecosystem where people would just do cashbacks and massive discounts. So I think people are conscious and people are insisting on value for money and success of the money that they are spending. Focus on the right priorities.
So, Ranjit, we'll come to this maybe in the end and we'll put it to Ashish. But just to wind down this particular conversation around, better managing your operations, the ROI part, right? And I know we've addressed this in some ways through this entire conversation. But over here, if starting with Ashish, you want to talk to us about how you would want to separate out the managing of operations with the finance, and what kind of approach you take to measuring this, right? We've addressed what we shouldn't do in terms of stifling or over analyzing, but what to your sense are some of the basics that first time founders can keep in mind?
So, Saina, when it comes to the operations, there are various parts of the operational puzzle, right? Depending on the business we are, there could be operations. There could be operations for on the marketing side. There will be operations on the finance bit, and there will be operations on the core business execution itself. What those areas need is process controls and checks and balances to ensure that, suppose let's say we're a consumer business and we're a business like a Dunzo or a Milk Basket or something which is actually collecting money on every transaction by transaction. You need to make sure that your ops are going to have the tallying effects, and you are making sure that customers are not going to be overcharged. You're making sure that your security processes are not compromised. The customers are not going to end up being vulnerable with their data. So there are going to be checks and balances, and a lot of these are going to be coming from the core product and the system itself that the founders and the tech teams have built. The core product will solve for a lot of these checks and balances. The more the level of integration holistically across the entire business, the better. And when you start talking about the finance side of it, I think the finance team is the team which can take an objective view of things and not shy away from asking the hard questions. If the business is of a, depending on the nature of the business, one needs to track metrics weekly, quarterly, or monthly. If you're not tracking it monthly and leaving it to quarterly, that's the investor's job. Leave it to them. As a founder, as a core team, you should be tracking the metrics much ahead of a quarterly meeting, and most founders do. I have not seen cases where good founders are not going to keep a tab on some of their numbers virtually on a daily or a weekly basis, also if it is a B2C business. On a B2B side, having a strong hold on the sales funnel and making sure that you're continuously adding to that sales funnel revenues on the bookings made, and then it flows to the accounting. Keeping a tab on the sales funnel of how the leads are progressing to the next stage, whether implementations have happened. I think monitoring all of those becomes super critical. So I think there would be days in a week kind of a framework where you are going to have an all hands on and make sure that everybody is going to put all of their situations where they stand and what they are committing for the next 4 days of the week at that point in time. And finance becomes a nice system to take care of all of those and make everybody accountable and make sure that it is measured and brought out at subsequent discussions, which may not be weekly, which may be monthly. So it should be monitored in that frequency and it should be across all stages. And I think broadly, if we are doing it in a certain frequency and without actually frustrating our teams, that's the holy grail.
That's the holy grail. Rhythm on that issue. I know for you it is for Cubics it's very very important because you'll have long-term large contracts to actually your efficiency or the money you earn actually comes from how well you manage your operations, right? So you want to speak to us about that as we wind down this conversation on what your experience has been, how closely you monitor, track this, and how you do it?
I wish I could have shown you my dashboard. So, we monitor very, very deeply. So we have everything integrated to each other, from the timesheets to everything. And that by the end of each day, by around 8:30, 9 o'clock, all the data flows into NetSuite from various tools what we use. And that's about it, the order book and everything. So it's, and especially I would say that now, because we implemented complete automation in processes about 3-4 months back, and essentially after that it's just been firefighting time of COVID, so everything is just very haywire. But yes, I can say that if we did not build this, we would have been down by now. So if we did not have this data flowing, and if we did not have this deep cost control, deep control over every aspect, right from PO approvals to sales order approvals to invoices and everything, if we did not have this control, we would have been finished by now. So that's how important it is for us.
Okay. And how do you gear the organization, Rhythm, all your team members to take it as seriously, right? Because sometimes I think it might also be an issue where it becomes, feels like too much control, right? That maybe the executive or the management is trying to take. So give us a sense of how well you've been able to communicate this and actually make people feel that, hey, this is good for us, right? Like you're saying that this has actually become sort of core to your survival at a very, very difficult time of doing business.
So it's a very fragmented system we have built. We have built a kind of a very new age system wherein everybody has a very small part to play in just by entering data, just by entering a little bit of data. So, we have the project managers who we took in our confidence. They assign tasks to people, and then based on each task, each and every of our employees, they just log in the time. And then everything, it's just the integration part of it. And we started on very early with this. So we were just about to go from, we were just about to expand large as a company. So I think we got in at the right stage. The other thing, what COVID helped us is that it gave us enough time to practice and implement things. When the entire world is shut down, we are sitting at home for 3 months in lockdown and just talking to each other, talking to everybody, and practicing and implementing and figuring out things. So when we came out of this thing, we were already ready with no disturbance. I mean, we had no transaction load at that time when we were implementing. So I think that was a kind of a boon for us.
All right. So we started the conversation with Rahul, right, talking about the impact that COVID has had on the VC industry, and I'm going to try and close this, Harshit, with you, giving us a sense of what the last few months have been like, and to the point that Rhythm made, right? How do you see the role that you and the finance compliance team played at Atlin in the last 6, 7, 8 months of actually holding things together, right? Uh, I think, would you say that there was newfound respect, if there wasn't already, in the team and in the larger community around the role that you guys played in the company?
Actually, I would say that generally, and I think Ashish would very much associate with it. We always used to believe that finance team cannot work from remote. Like finance cannot be remote. We need to see each other. We need to speak to each other. There has to be conversation going around, and that's how you work around it. So that myth got broken, right? Like every team can work remote. The work goes on, like as we say that the show goes on, the work never stops. And that's how what we felt like there are some of the things which we feel that like we need to unlearn, right, and then relearn the things. Look on the best practices that are there in the industry, and see how we are doing those things inside. Are they up to the mark, or are we doing something in a more archaic manner? Can this be innovated, or can this be dropped down in terms of the controls and the processes? Are we doing something which is over the board, or are we doing something which could be stopped and then can be simplified in terms of it? And to take that particular instance, it's very, I would say, specific to every organization. It's very specific to B2B, and it's very specific to B2C. Very important to have, I would say, segregation of the functions, like in terms of who is making the transaction, who is actually checking that transaction, having the zoom in and the zoom out perspective of both the pieces. What we generally tend to do in terms of when we are managing our day-to-day operations, we are so much involved into your day-to-day pieces in terms of the detail. Sometimes we tend to lose out what's the bigger picture, what's the smart perspective, what is the objective that we are trying to see. And as soon as we do that, we generally tend to align ourselves with the organization. And then what's generally being seen in terms of the processes which are more of time consuming, it becomes more of allowing everyone to have sufficient checks and control post in place to not break the things. Like it's generally being said, fail fast and break things. And what I believe is fail fast, learn faster, and why to break things, right? It's not something that it's a sprint, it's a marathon. We have to go there, we have to do the work day in and day out. And the focus should always be on the long term, right? And how are we ensuring that how our short term is aligned to that long term? And regular communication around with the team, especially on the personal front as well, because one cannot separate out in terms of past 6 to 7 months what has been going around. So checking on the personal front and on a jovial, on a cordial basis with the team as well in terms of day-to-day daily checkings. That's how in terms of it, like, as again, it's very one-to-one, it's very specific. It's not one medicine for all. It has to be seen with the particular person, speak with it, see it, analyze it, and then you actually give out the right prescription and everything.
All right. Last word to you, Ashish. Newfound love for CFOs and folks that work in finance. What is your own take? I think, do you feel that we've turned a corner and there will be more emphasis placed on this overall?
I'm a little biased. Please bear with me.
Yeah.
With you confession of my positive bias, I think all in all, I think we responded well to the challenge. I think founders are going to be crazy lonely. The situation like this makes them lonelier. The ability to take on that responsibility and ensure that disruption doesn't happen in terms of the reporting, the cash flows, the management, the compliances was definitely held commendably. And most of the businesses, I would say 8 out of 10 businesses, if not 10 out of 10, definitely went through some kind of a reorg, some kind of cash management exercise, some kind of stress management exercise, and they couldn't have pulled this off without the finance on top of it, right? If the finance was not on top of it, it was the founder who was doing some crazy heavy lifting and making those calls even lonelier, with more duress and anxiety. So I think it has been commendable. We have observed this across portfolio that people have responded phenomenally well, and even when we see around us, there have been large advisory setups, and Simon, you know this, the teams work, both of our teams work closely. They haven't opened office for the last 5 months, and things are flowing. Like Harshit was saying, the fact that we have shown to each other that yeah, we can work remotely. Of course, I am not a fan of it at all. Miss office and miss colleagues at work, but yeah, they've shown that we will not allow things to be disrupted so easily, even though there are factors beyond our control. The leading to the billing is what I would say.
All right. Okay. On that note, thank you very much, Ashish, Harshit, and Rhythm for joining us today. Really appreciate your time and all the inputs that came in. Thanks to the audience as well. We will be circulating a recording of this session so you all can share it with your teams if you so wish to. Once again, thanks everyone for joining in. Really appreciate your time and engagement.
Thanks, Saina. Thanks, Harshit. Bye.
Thanks, Ashish. Thanks,
Thanks
Rhythm. Thanks,
everyone.
Rahul.